My name is Alexandra Chin. I'm 36 years old founder and CEO of Reynolds Technologies, a company I built from scratch 12 years ago after watching my father's small business crumble under corporate raiders. But tonight I sit silently in my marble-floored living room, pretending to be nothing more than James's unemployed wife. My husband and his colleagues laugh loudly, mocking me for failing to land even an entry-level job. They don't know that tomorrow I'll walk into their offices, not as the defeated woman they ridicule, but as their ultimate superior, the architect of their downfall. I watch them through the crystal rim of my glass. 5 men in tailored suits sat sprawled across Italian leather, their laughter bouncing off the marble like knives, slicing through my quiet. James, my husband of 8 years, led their cruel chorus, his tie-loosened eyes gleaming with liquor and petty triumph. Can't even land an entry-level job. He sneered, raising his glass for another toast to my failure. They didn't know I had chosen this silence. They didn't know I had built Reynolds Technologies from nothing, brick by brutal brick, after watching my father's store collapse under corporate raiders. They didn't know the woman they mocked was the one who paid for the scotch warming their tongues, the watches hugging their wrists, the art looming over them like silent judges. James used to tell me I'd find my place one day. Back then, he'd seemed kind. Back then, I thought kindness was love. But as soon as he married me, moved into what he thought was our house, his kindness soured into contempt. Success never changes people. It only reveals them. Tonight, his voice dripped with fake sympathy. "Hey, honey," he called out, eyes glinting with cruelty. "Maybe you should try the coffee shop down the street. I hear they're hiring baristas." Their laughter tore through me like bullets, but I didn't flinch. I had learned early that silence is not weakness, it is strategy, because tomorrow the same lips that curled with mockery would tremble with fear. I set down my glass, its cool weight, anchoring me to my calm. In my private study upstairs, locked away behind hidden panels, my world glowed across 3 monitors, the world I built, my empire, my redemption. And tomorrow I would walk into Reynolds Technologies, not as James's unemployable wife, but as Alexandra Chin, the CEO, the founder, the woman they would kneel before in trembling apology. I closed my eyes and heard my father's voice echo through memory. Success isn't about who shouts the loudest con guy. It's about who watches, waits, and picks the perfect moment to act. The perfect moment had arrived. I woke before dawn, the house silent except for James's ragged snoring beside me. I lay there watching him, his mouth half open, a thin trail of drool glistening under the dim light. This man who laughed at my dreams. This man who would soon kneel before them. I rose, my bare feet cold against the marble floor. In the dimness of my private study, I changed into a navy suit, simple, unbranded, intentionally unremarkable. Today I would not enter my kingdom as its queen. Not yet. Today I would enter as the ghost they always thought me to be. At 6:30 a.m., I walked through the service entrance of Reynolds Technologies, the building I built from the ground up, brick by brick, strategy by strategy, betrayal by betrayal. The security guard didn't look twice as he handed me a visitor badge. "Interview candidate," he mumbled, eyes glazed with routine. "Angela Martinez." That was the name printed on the badge. Angela Martinez, failed consultant, desperate for a job. I had lived with this mask for 8 years. Today would be its final performance. In the HR lobby, I sat an hour early, clutching my cheap leather folder. Executives streamed past me in tailored confidence. Not one glanced at me. To them, I was invisible, a smudge on the pristine glass of their ambition. At 8:45, James walked in, laughing into his phone, arrogance radiating off him like cheap cologne. He didn't see me. Of course he didn't. He never really had. Miss Martinez. A man called my alias. Please follow me. The skills test was insultingly simple. I made deliberate mistakes, fingers trembling, with rehearsed anxiety. Through the glass, I saw James smirking at me, messaging his friends. Their phones buzzed in unison. Their laughter seeped through the glass walls like rot. Finally, they ushered me into a panel interview. 3 men sat before me, board superior, already decided my worth. So one of them drawled, not bothering to introduce himself. What makes you think you're qualified for Reynolds Technologies? I answered with my carefully crafted story. Each word was another dagger twisting in my chest, another drop of poison swallowed without flinching. Through the glass, James appeared again. This time he pointed at me and laughed, the others joining in with silent, open-mouthed mirth. The interview ended as I knew it would. "We'll be in touch," they lied. As I walked out, James's voice sliced through the hall. "No way that was your wife, man," he cackled. "She really is desperate." I didn't look back. Their laughter followed me down the corridor like vultures circling a dying animal. But I was not dying. I was transforming. I walked into the restroom, my pulse silent and steady, as if my heart itself was holding its breath. Inside the last stall, hidden behind a locked door, hung my true armor, a black Chanel suit, tailored to perfection, and my Louboutin heels. At the bottom of the garment bag sat my real badge, the one no one in this building had ever seen in person. I stripped off the cheap navy suit. It fell to the floor like old skin. I slid into my Chanel jacket, buttoning each pearl button with deliberate precision. I slipped on my heels, their red soles flashing like blood with every step. Around my neck, I fastened my mother's pearl necklace, feeling its cold touch against my throat, grounding me in lineage and legacy. Finally, I clipped the badge onto my lapel. Alexandra Chin, founder, CEO, owner. I stood before the mirror and studied the woman staring back. Her eyes were hard obsidian, her lips calm, her spine straight as a blade. This was no longer Angela Martinez, the desperate applicant. This was the woman who built Reynolds Technologies from ashes. This was the storm they never saw coming. My mother once told me success is silent con guy until the perfect moment to roar. This was that moment. I stepped out of the stall. The women at the sinks turned their eyes widening in confusion and awe. Just minutes ago, I was nothing to them. Now they parted silently as I passed like peasants before a queen. I walked down the marble corridor, each click of my Louboutin echoing my arrival. Heads turned, whispers spread like fire, licking dry grass. They recognized my face from the encrypted video calls. The phantom CEO, always hidden, always unapproachable. Until now? I entered the private elevator, the one James always wondered about, the one installed for my exclusive use. As the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. For the first time in 8 years, I saw myself again. Not James's unemployed wife, not the woman forced to wear meekness like a veil, but Alexandra Chin, the architect, the empire builder, the predator no longer pretending to be prey. As the elevator rose, so did the silence within me sharpening into resolve. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, I stepped out into a stunned hush. The board members seated in the glass-walled conference room turned as one to stare. Their eyes widened in realization, some with respect, some with fear. But first, I had another meeting. I turned left, walking towards the smaller conference room, where James and his friends laughed over morning coffee. Their voices seeped into the hallway, mocking smug oblivious. I paused at the doorway, listening to my husband's voice one last time as a free man. She actually thinks she could work here. James was saying his words, dripping contempt. She'll always be nothing. A calm, clean silence filled my chest. I stepped into the room. Their laughter died instantly. Coffee cups froze mid-air. 5 men stared at me, eyes wide with confusion, that morphed into dawning horror. "Whoa, what are you doing here?" James stammered, his face draining of color. I let the silence stretch, feeling its weight settle upon them like judgment. Then I spoke, my voice clear, unhurried and cold as winter steel. "I'm here as CEO of Reynolds Technologies, and all of you are fired." I stepped fully into the room, letting the silence settle like falling ash. 5 men stared at me, frozen mid-movement, their faces twisted in a grotesque blend of disbelief and dread. James's eyes locked onto mine. His mouth opened, but no words came out, only a strangled, broken sound. I walked to the head of the table heels, striking the marble with surgical precision. Each step was an execution, each breath a death sentence. "Alex, what is this?" He finally managed, his voice thin and trembling. "Why are you dressed like that?" I turned my gaze to him, letting the full weight of my power bear down on his shivering confidence. "Like what, James?" I said softly, my voice calm and cutting. "Like the CEO of Reynolds Technologies." His face drained of color. His lips moved soundlessly as the realization devoured him from the inside out. This is some sick joke," he whispered, glancing desperately at his friends seeking solidarity. But they were staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. They saw the truth before he did. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin velvet box. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and took out my wedding ring. The platinum band gleamed under the sterile office lights, a silent testament to a lie that had ended long before this moment. I placed it on the polished table before him. The soft clink of metal against wood was louder than any scream. James flinched as if struck. "Alex, please don't do this," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I love you. You know that? Everything I did, it was for us." I let out a quiet laugh, a sound without warmth or mercy. "Everything you did was for yourself," I said. "You married me because you thought I was weak. You mocked me because it made you feel strong. But you forgot one thing, James." His eyes were wet now, desperation flooding through him in pathetic, grasping waves. What did I forget?" I leaned forward, my gaze locked onto his soul, and whispered, "That I was never yours to break. I was only waiting for the perfect moment to break you." I straightened, smoothed the front of my suit, and turned to leave. "Wait, please, Alex." His voice rose behind me, cracking like old glass. You can't do this. I'm your husband." I paused at the door, my back to him, and spoke without looking over my shoulder. "No, James. You were my mistake." Then I walked out, leaving behind the ring, the marriage, and the man who once thought he owned me. As I stepped into the corridor, the heavy silence of the room shattered into frantic whispers and muffled sobs. But I didn't hear them. All I heard was my own calm, resolute heartbeat, steady, unbreakable, free. I stood in front of the restroom mirror, watching my reflection transform. The woman staring back at me no longer wore desperation like a shroud. No, she wore power. My black Chanel suit fit like liquid armor, each seam whispering silent promises of retribution. The Louboutin heels bit into the marble floor with every step, their crimson soles flashing like warning flares. Around my neck lay my mother's pearls, cold and heavy with legacy. Finally, I clipped on my real badge. Alexandra Chin, founder, CEO. I inhaled once, letting power flood every vein, and stepped out. The world beyond that restroom seemed to shift. The fluorescent hallway lights gleamed sharper, the air tasted cleaner, my senses alive with the electric clarity of purpose. As I walked down the marble corridor, each click of my heel struck like a judge's gavel. People turned, first in confusion, then in shock, and finally in a stunned, fearful awe. Wasn't she? Their eyes flicked from my suit to my badge to my face, struggling to reconcile this poised, commanding woman with the trembling applicant from just an hour ago. I said nothing. Their silence was sweeter than any applause. I passed the HR lobby. The receptionist's mouth fell open. She stood halfway from her chair, eyes wide and unblinking. Ms. Chin," she whispered, her voice trembling like the air before a coming storm. I nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in their world. As I crossed the open plan office, a hush fell in my wake. Executives straightened instinctively. Assistants froze mid-keystroke. Somewhere a dropped coffee cup shattered its sound, ringing out like a herald's bell, announcing the arrival of royalty. I stepped into the private elevator, the one no one else could access. As the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Gone was Angela Martinez. Gone was the desperate wife, the invisible woman. Standing in her place was Alexandra Chin, the founder they had never seen in person, the phantom CEO, whose signature built this empire, brick by brutal brick. I smiled just slightly, the kind of smile that speaks of silent wars won and kingdoms claimed without shedding a single drop of blood, only dignity, strategy, and ruthless patience. As the elevator rose, so did the storm within me, calm, steady, ready. Today I would walk onto the executive floor. Not as a supplicant, not as James's humiliated wife, but as the architect of their entire existence. And when I stepped out, their world would never be the same again. I stepped into the boardroom, the quiet click of my heels, slicing through the hushed air like a blade through silk. The 12 board members turned as one, their eyes widening with confusion, flickering with fear, then settling into something deeper, dawning respect. But my gaze didn't waver to greet their silent salutations. It narrowed sharp as a hunter's focus to the 5 men huddled at the far end of the mahogany table. James and his loyal circle, the architects of cruelty within my kingdom. James's face paled, then flushed a violent red as he scrambled to his feet, his chair scraping back with a screech that jarred the silence. "Alex, what the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger laced in panic. "You're supposed to be at home." I ignored him. My steps were unhurried, each one punctuating the charged air like the steady beat of a war drum. I reached the head of the table and placed my leather folder down with deliberate calm. Then I looked at them. Really looked. 5 men who fancied themselves wolves, their teeth bared against the world, never realizing the true predator had been watching in silence all along. I tapped my tablet screen. Instantly, the massive digital display behind me flickered to life, its glow washing over their stunned faces. Video footage played in crystal clarity. James laughing as he mocked junior staff, dismissing their tears as weakness, bragging about insider trades that fattened his portfolio, sneering at single mothers laid off to fund his holiday bonuses. Another clip showed Michael drunk at a company party groping an intern as she tried to pull away tears shining in her mascara-smeared eyes. Another revealed falsified expense reports, systematic embezzlement hidden behind forged approvals. The silence curdled into disgust. A few board members averted their eyes, their lips curling in revulsion. Others turned their gaze to James, their stares sharp with cold contempt. I lifted my chin and spoke my voice, clear, unhurried, lethal. "James Morrison." I said, each syllable ringing like a death knell. "You and your team are hereby terminated for cause effective immediately." His mouth opened and closed, his lips trembling like a drowning fish gasping for air. "Alex, baby, please, we can talk about this at home." Don't do this in front of everyone." I tilted my head slightly, studying him with clinical detachment, as one might observe an insect pinned beneath glass. Home. I echoed softly, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it on the polished table with a cold metallic click that cut through the room's silence. "James," I said, my voice calm as falling snow. "From this moment on, I am not your wife. I am only your CEO. And as your CEO, you're fired." A strangled noise escaped his throat, half sob, half broken whimper. His shoulders shook as he reached for me with trembling hands. Please, Alex, I love you." I smiled then, a small pitying smile, devoid of warmth or forgiveness. The smile of a queen who has learned her power cannot be bartered. "Love?" I whispered, my voice velvet-edged steel. "You loved my silence, my humiliation, my obedience. But love, James, love would have never mocked me for bleeding just because you preferred me bruised." I turned to security without another glance at him. "Escort Mr. Morrison and his associates out. Revoke all building access immediately." The guards stepped forward, their footsteps echoing in the charged stillness. James lunged, tears streaking down his flushed face, his hands reaching for mine, as if touch alone could pull him back from the abyss. "Alex, please, I'm begging you, don't do this." I met his gaze one last time, and what he saw there, unbreakable clarity forged in fire, and betrayal silenced him to a trembling shell of the man he once believed himself to be. "You should have remembered one thing," I said softly, each word gentle as a benediction, final as a tombstone. "Queens don't beg, James. We command." As security led him away, sobbing, the board remained silent, their eyes fixed on me with stunned reverence. Outside the glass walls, employees gathered in quiet awe, watching as the phantom CEO revealed herself not with screams or threats, but with quiet, absolute, irrevocable power. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered awake beyond the tower's glass, I felt it anchor in my chest, fierce, molten, eternal. For the first time in my life, I was free. Not because I had broken him, but because I had finally remembered who I was. I sat behind my desk, the city skyline unfolding before me, like a conquered kingdom bathed in dying twilight. Towers of steel and glass glittered under the descending darkness, unaware their masters' worlds were about to burn. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, the final sequence of protocol thunder ready to be unleashed, a plan orchestrated with surgical precision designed to cut deeper than any blade could reach. I pressed enter. Within minutes, the financial news feeds erupted. Headlines screamed in bold red banners across trading terminals, breaking rumors of federal investigation into Reynolds Technologies' merger deal. I watched the monitors flicker in chaos as panic surged like wildfire through the markets. Tickers plunged, brokers barked frenzied orders into headsets. Screens blazed with 1,000 colors of fear. Confusion rippled outward in widening circles. Traders clutched their ties with trembling hands, beads of sweat rolling down their temples as numbers bled red across the glass walls. At that very moment, James and his cronies sat in a downtown bar, drowning what remained of their dignity in $100 whiskey poured over crystal-clear ice. Their laughter rattled against the gold-tiled ceiling, their smug smiles gleaming under amber pendant lights. Then their phones began to buzz. One by one, the smirks vanished. I imagined the blood draining from James's handsome face as he read the headlines, his pulse crashing like a trapped animal's. I could almost hear his frantic voice slicing through the smoky air. Sell. Sell everything, now! Like puppets tangled in invisible strings, they scrambled for their phones, fingers jabbing at glass, calling their brokers with trembling urgency. Sell. Liquidate. dump it all before it was too late. They thought they were saving themselves. They didn't realize they were stepping straight into the trap I spent months weaving from the fibers of their arrogance. I leaned back in my leather chair, exhaling slowly, as the hum of my office monitors calmed to a quiet rhythm only I could hear. The scent of jasmine from my desk diffuser curled around me like a silk scarf grounding my focus as my team executed the next phase with silent, deadly precision. Release Phase 2, I instructed. My legal chief sent out a prepared public statement announcing Reynolds Technologies' new multi-billion-dollar government defense contract. The truth I had held back until this precise, calculated moment. Within minutes, our stock price soared to record-breaking highs, climbing faster than any algorithm could track. But James and his inner circle, they had already sold everything, at a massive loss. Their insider panic, their own creation, triggered the SEC's monitoring software instantly. Their greed was all the evidence I needed. But I wasn't finished. "Activate final release," I said softly. Screens across my office lit up with footage, streamed live from encrypted drives. James and his friends, caught just hours before, slouched around the bar table drunkenly, boasting about manipulating trades, mocking compliance officers, laughing about exploiting their positions for personal gain. Their words dripped with entitlement, each syllable sealing their fate with another confession. I closed my eyes for a brief, silent moment, letting the scene etch itself into my memory. The taste of victory was not sweet. It was metallic cold, like blood in the mouth after a long, brutal fight. But it was real. It was earned. And it was mine. Ma'am Sarah's voice crackled softly through my earpiece, calm and precise as ever. The SEC and FBI have both confirmed active investigation. Their assets are being frozen as we speak. I opened my eyes, staring out at the city lights below. I felt the quake rippling outward from my office like an invisible bomb, shaking the foundations of their empire to rubble. The horizon flickered with life, unaware that in boardrooms and penthouses across the city, kings were falling. James's number flashed on my private screen. I didn't answer. His name appeared again, and again. Each unanswered call, another dagger twisting into the rotting carcass of his panic. He thought he was untouchable, that he could humiliate me, own me, break me, then toss my pieces to the wind. But he forgot one universal law of the corporate jungle. Never underestimate the quietest person in the room. They're the one holding your entire fate in their steady, silent hands. Tonight, James lost everything: his fortune, his reputation, his freedom. Tomorrow, when agents knock on his glass penthouse doors at dawn, when handcuffs bite into his wrists, as city lights flicker awake far below, he will finally understand what true power feels like. Because true power is not loud. It does not gloat. It does not scream. True power is silent, and it only roars when it's too late for anyone to run. I watched the stock ticker bleed red across my monitors. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, steady as my breathing. James and his friends were panicking, calling their brokers with trembling voices, ordering immediate liquidation. They thought the federal investigation headlines were real. They thought selling early would save them. They didn't know I wrote those headlines myself. I had spent months feeding James falsified reports, letting him believe Reynolds Technologies was under scrutiny. Every leak, every whisper in the market, all planted by my team, executed with surgical precision. Because Protocol Thunder wasn't just about destroying them. It was about making them destroy themselves. I watched James on the security feed, pacing his glass office like a trapped animal. Sweat darkened his expensive shirt. His hands shook as he clutched his phone, screaming at his broker. Sell it all now. And just like that, his empire crumbled. A notification pinged on my screen. The public statement was Live Reynolds Technologies secures multi-billion government contract. Our stock soared instantly. The shares James and his friends dumped in panic were absorbed by my shell companies at record low prices. Their insider panic trades were logged. SEC charges were inevitable. I closed my eyes, feeling the silent roar of victory reverberate through my chest. James always thought I was too quiet, too soft, too small to ever be a threat. But he forgot. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is strategy. Silence is the blade pressed against your throat before you even know it's there. My phone buzzed with his name. I let it ring. Again and again. Each unanswered call, another noose tightening around his trembling confidence. Because Protocol Thunder wasn't just a plan, it was a reminder. Never mistake a queen's silence for surrender. It only means she's waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I stepped out of the private elevator heels, echoing like gunshots down the silent corridor. The executive floor smelled of leather and arrogance. My floor, my kingdom, my war ground. I walked past glass offices where men in tailored suits looked up, their eyes widening in confusion. The same woman they laughed at an hour ago now walked with her chin held high, hair pinned in perfect authority, Chanel suit cutting sharp lines against her body. I stopped outside the conference room. Through the frosted glass, I saw James at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up tie loosened, his laughter rising above the others like a victorious trumpet. My chest felt cold, not with fear, with precision. I pushed the door open. Silence fell like a guillotine. 5 men stared at me, mouths half open. James blinked, confusion flickering across his flushed face. "Angela!" He scoffed, eyes scanning my suit, my badge. "What the hell are you doing here, dressed like?" He stopped. His gaze froze on the name clipped to my lapel. Alexandra Chin, founder and CEO. The blood drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His hands trembled on the conference table as he tried to stand, then sat back down heavily. "Wait." His voice cracked. This isn't, you're not, you can't be." I looked at each of them one by one and felt no anger, only silence. The silence of 8 years waiting for this moment. The silence of every humiliation I swallowed whole. The silence of a storm gathering beyond the horizon. I walked to the head of the table, feeling their eyes follow me like prey, tracking the predator. I placed my leather folder down with deliberate calm. Then I raised my gaze to James and spoke my voice, quiet, clear, and edged with finality. "Sit down. All of you. We're about to begin." 6 months later, I stood by my office window, the autumn wind battering the glass with restless hands. Beyond the tinted pane, the city pulsed with its indifferent rhythm, cars threading through rain-slick streets, buildings rising like silent sentinels into the steel-gray sky. For the first time in years, my reflection looked back at me without shadows. Only truth remained, unflinching, silent, sovereign. I sipped my coffee, its heat blooming across my tongue, as Sarah's calm voice carried through the quiet. "James is working as a junior sales associate at an electronics store in Ohio," she read from the morning report. "His manager wrote him up last week for insubordination." I closed my eyes, picturing him there, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, polyester shirt clinging to stale sweat, forced to smile at customers who spoke down to him the same way he once spoke down to me. His name embroidered on a cheap plastic badge. The Emperor of Nothing, Michael. I asked, my voice cool and detached. Sarah hesitated, glancing down at her tablet before answering. "He's in psychiatric care. Severe depression. They're monitoring him for suicidal ideation." I nodded slowly, the taste of coffee turning metallic in my mouth. Michael. The man who laughed the loudest when James mocked my worth. The man who bragged about breaking women to prove his power. Now his laughter had rotted away, leaving only silence. Even cruelty devours itself eventually. And the others, I asked, tilting my head as rain streaked the window in silver lines. One teaches business ethics at a community college. The irony isn't lost on the faculty, but they needed someone for accreditation. Another works construction under his brother-in-law. The last moved to Alaska to find himself. I let her words settle into the quiet of my office. Power is never loud, I reminded myself. It unfolds slowly like dawn creeping across a battlefield littered with the fallen. And when it finally arrives, there is no fanfare, only the unyielding certainty of its presence. "What about their families?" I asked softly. Sarah glanced up, her eyes sharp and steady. "3 are in divorce proceedings. James's wife you already finalized. His mother is living with him now, apparently. She's been publicly silent since the investigations closed." I exhaled the breath trembling in my chest before dissolving into calm. Their wealth was gone, their networks shattered, their LinkedIn profiles once bloated with endorsements, and hollow praise now read like tombstones, marking dead reputations. Outside, the wind tore yellow leaves from their branches, sending them skittering across the stone plaza below, like exiles fleeing a fallen kingdom. I wondered, as I often did, if James still woke up, expecting to see the marble floors of our penthouse, only to find cracked linoleum beneath his feet. If he still reached across the empty bed beside him, seeking warmth that would never return. Revenge, I realized then, is never sweet. It tastes of iron and rain and quiet. It leaves you standing alone with your victories, staring down at the wreckage of those who tried to bury you, because those who once feared your weakness now fear your strength. But as I turned back toward my desk, my gaze caught the glass wall overlooking the break room. Inside, Jennifer's team huddled together, laughing around a monitor, the same woman James once called useless during a shareholder meeting. Now she led the AI division that would define our future. That was the true aftermath. Not their ruin, but the rise of those they tried to keep down. My phone buzzed with a final note from Sarah. She didn't bother reading it aloud. Instead, she simply handed me the tablet. "James, another email, another plea. Alex, please, just one meeting, just one chance to explain." I looked out at the steel blue skyline as rain clouds broke, sending sunlit shafts through the silver mist. My reflection gazed back at me, composed, calm, unbreakable. I whispered so softly that only the glass heard me. Queens don't entertain ghosts. Then I turned away, leaving his memory in the shadows where it belonged, and walked back to my empire, rebuilt from ruin, stronger than ever, and forever mine. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, the evening sun setting the city ablaze in molten gold. Towers glowed like lit pyres against the fading sapphire sky, the glass panels catching every dying ray and throwing it back with quiet defiance. 6 months had passed since the day I tore off my mask and burned their illusions to ash. 6 months since James fell screaming into the void he dug for others. "Final numbers are in," Sarah said beside me, her voice calm but edged with pride. "Profits up 60% this quarter. Employee satisfaction at record highs." I nodded, my gaze steady on the city that pulsed beneath me, like a living organism, mine to nurture or destroy, mine to shape into something worth inheriting. Jennifer, I asked, though I already knew. Promoted to head of AI division. Her team filed 3 new patents this month alone. A small smile curved my lips. Jennifer, the woman James once called a waste of salary, now carried our future on her brilliant shoulders, her name whispered with respect across boardrooms. Across the company, it was the same. Those once mocked, silenced, sidelined, now led with confidence, honed by survival, and sharpened by dignity, reclaimed. Any issues with morale, I asked, though the answer already hummed in the quiet strength around me. Sarah shook her head. None. In fact, there's a waiting list for mentorship slots. People want to grow here again. I closed my eyes briefly, letting her words sink into the quiet, hidden corners of my chest. Not as revenge, but as healing. The true victory was never James's fall. It was in every voice that rose once his shadow no longer smothered them. It was in every laugh that no longer flinched. Every decision made without fear. Every door opened because no one stood guard to bar them anymore. I remembered my mother's words spoken to me when I was a girl, sitting at her old Singer sewing machine watching her stitch tiny glass pearls onto a simple black dress that would one day become mine. Than kong, fai het ton hat kongai, ma la shon jung koan kak je gam len. Success isn't about who roars the loudest, my daughter. It's knowing the exact moment to let your roar shake the world. I opened my eyes and saw my reflection in the glass. No longer Angela Martinez, the desperate applicant with second-hand heels and dreams too big for her borrowed suits. No longer James's silent wife, her worth chained to his approval. I was Alexandra Chin, founder CEO, queen of an empire, rebuilt in my own image. Behind me, I heard laughter ripple down the hallway. Jennifer's team engineers and designers and marketers weaving ideas into reality voices, blending in harmony, unchained by fear. Each sound was a testament to what we had created from ruin, a cathedral built from the rubble of silent screams. Schedule the global town hall for next week. I told Sarah, my voice calm, threaded with iron. It's time they hear directly from me about the future. Yes, ma'am. She paused, then asked softly, any regrets? I watched the sun slip behind the jagged skyline, leaving only streaks of crimson and indigo darkness, washing the city in quiet absolution. No, I whispered. No regrets, only lessons. And the greatest lesson of all turned from the window, feeling the last warmth of the dying sun brush against my cheek, my gaze clear, my heart calm as a blade resting in its sheath. Power is not in how loud you roar. It's in knowing exactly when to. And with that, I walked back to my desk, the empire humming quietly around me, ready to build something greater than revenge, something worthy of every silent scream I'd ever swallowed, something worthy of the woman I had become. As I sat alone in my office, the city lights blinking below, like dying stars scattered across a velvet sea. I let the silence settle around me like a second skin. Outside, glass towers loomed against the indigo sky, their windows glowing and fading, a rhythm of life indifferent to the war I had waged within these walls. The war was over. The battlefield lay quiet, littered with fallen kings who once mistook their cruelty for power. People always think revenge is about destruction, about torching everything your enemies love to ash, and dancing in the ruins savage and triumphant. But as I watched Jennifer's team through the glass walls, their faces alive with laughter, passion, and possibility, I understood a deeper truth. Revenge was never about them. It was about us. It was about every woman forced to lower her gaze when her ideas were stolen and rebranded. Every intern reduced to tears in bathroom stalls after meetings that cut deeper than knives. Every quiet genius who packed up her dreams and walked away because the battle felt too heavy to bear alone. James fell. Michael fell. All of them fell. And yes, there was satisfaction in that. Watching their power crumble beneath the weight of their own arrogance felt like justice served cold and clean. But it was fleeting, like watching glass shatter under your heel. Beautiful, only for the moment it catches the light before becoming just another mess to sweep away. What remained after the shards were cleared was something far more powerful. Revenge is not about destruction. It is about creation. I created a company where brilliance speaks louder than arrogance, where ideas are judged by their merit, not by the baritone that delivers them, where kindness is strength, not weakness, where vulnerability is not exploited, but safeguarded. I created a kingdom where queens no longer have to hide their crowns in locked studies or behind polite silence, where they wear them openly, proudly, their heads unbowed. I remembered my father's tired hands closing his little shop for the last time, the smell of machine oil and old wood heavy in the twilight. His voice was quiet as he turned the rusted key, whispering to me words I only now understood. Kongai don't just tear down what hurts you. Build something better in its place. And now, watching my empire rise from the ruins of their cruelty, I finally understood. The truest joy